In this video, I'm going to speak about rotation at the piano. Now, I know there's tons of materials on this already. However, I believe I can show an extremely important distinction between two different categories, two different types of rotation, each of which serves a very different function. Now, in the mainstream, when people promote rotation, there'll be two things that they say in terms of why we need rotation. The first one, the most obvious one, basically, when you rotate into a finger or thumb, you can deliver arm energy through that finger or thumb, and you can be helped to pass more energy into the keyboard. Fairly obvious, really. And the second benefit they'll explain might be in terms of freedom. People will often say, yeah, using rotation buys us lots of freedom at the keyboard, which we wouldn't have if we didn't use rotation, which is absolutely true. Both of these two things are accurate. What doesn't get said, however, is there's two different styles of rotation. One of them fits delivering energy better. The other one fits freeing yourself better. Now, if we know them both very well, it does become possible to combine those two things as if it's a single process. However, it's not. You have to know two different things and combine them if you want to get the benefits of both. So I'll show you exactly how this works. Anyway, so the first one, in terms of delivering energy through the thumb, if I rock into my thumb, particularly if I take a run up, very obvious, this is delivering arm energy. Now, I'll show you this thing, the two processes there. The first one drives the energy into the thumb. So perhaps my centre, it might be my fifth finger, it might be somewhere in the middle of the hand, doesn't matter exactly. But the point is the centre is elsewhere. The thumb turns around that centre, and from that centre, the thumb is driven into the key. The problem is, that means when the thumb lands, if the thumb has any kind of softness, if it's not completely rigid, it's going to get squashed into the key. So at that point, okay, yeah, maybe we back off, but we haven't got good balance just by backing off. On the other hand, supposing we make that thumb rigid as we drive it into the key with the rotation. Okay, this time my thumb stood up against it, but what now? That was a really horrible landing, really quite awkward crash. Now I could back off, maybe now I relax a little bit. Sort of works, but supposing I take a difficult passage like this, if I have the mindset I'm using rotation to literally move these keys, then something like that. What happens if I go fast? You can't do that kind of thing fast. It just doesn't work. What it would actually look like, I'll play a little bit more. I'll play the opening bars of that same piece. See, this is actually very smooth. There's none of those judders, none of those sudden relaxations. And that's because it's based on this completely different style of rotation. The second style of rotation is that when you get to the key, if you want to be free, the trick is whichever finger you're playing becomes the centre. The rotation carries on. So if we only understand rotation as moving the key, it ends here. Either we're stiff, we relax, whatever. Doesn't give you balance, it doesn't work. The one that gives us good balance is when that becomes a centre and you turn around it. So I'll show you the two combined again, actually, even if I give it a real old whack. If the thumb becomes the centre, that's how it becomes free and stands up. These fingers here are slightly turning around the thumb as the new centre. So instead of this thing being crushed, or juddering and then having to relax to get out of that horrible stiff feeling, you can actually throw the hell out of it if you want. Because you have somewhere else to go around that, you can still end in balance. Even an almighty whack, it can be completely free. But there's two processes there, not one. The one that delivers energy to the key turns around a centre elsewhere. The thumb is the extremity away from another centre of rotation. When you get to the key, that's the turnover. Now the thumb becomes the centre, and that's why you can get both rolled into one at the same time. Now, of those, I stress you need to know both of those. As I say, people don't really explain this thing of the thumb becoming a centre, or whichever other finger. Same process, if it's another finger, same thing. Just this means my second finger must become the centre. And then again, we have somewhere to carry on to. We don't get stuck. Same thing, thumb or finger, whatever it is. Whichever finger we play has to be capable of becoming a centre in order to get true freedom and balance. As I was saying, the part that doesn't get explained at all most of the time is this idea of turning around it. Now, there's actually something in the Taubman method where they teach this indirectly, almost as if by accident. With their double rotations, you turn away from the finger before you go into it. And it's that turn away. While you're turning away, whichever finger's still there is becoming a centre. And that's why it works. You can't do that for real when you play fast. You're not secretly doing double rotations, of course not. What's happening when you do this, if you've done your double rotations first, you've learned to stand up around each finger for that to become a centre of rotation before you then go ahead and do your next rotation. And that's why when you stop rotating, of course we're not really doing it, it's not internalised, it's nonsense to speak of internalising. Like if it's driving the key, you can't internalise what drives the key. It's something else altogether. What we can keep is the freedom. So now you do a gradual rotation around those fingers, the freedom stays with you. And because every finger has that sense of the arm adjusting itself behind it, that kind of gradual, simple rotation allows the fingers to move the keys with confidence, without jamming, without getting stuck. There's a sense that everything's responsive around each finger as it takes the key. And coming back to that Bach passage again, this is why rotation is necessary. That has nothing to do with passing energy through the fingers. If we really want to understand rotation, we've got to be much less simplistic. Of course, as I was saying before, yeah, we do pass energy through fingers sometimes, but most of the time that's not what rotation is for. Its primary function is that we can put a key down and be free, and all the other fingers around there feel free. So when I go to my thumb, if I did rotation to drive that thumb, I would get stuck. These fingers feel stuck. They feel like they're straining to lift. They're not free because the thumb hasn't given them any support. If the thumb becomes a centre, I can open them up around that. Now every finger is free. Now, of course, we don't exaggerate that way when we play for real, but if we get just that little bit of the thumb centering the arm, everything becomes free. I go to another finger, I center around that one. So by turning around each finger as it plays, even after it plays actually, you could say it's during the taking of each key, there's a bit of rotation, but perhaps in many ways the most important of all is it's still going on in between. That's how we learn a real fluid balance. If we stop, that's not balance. The moment you stop, you're going to tend to have efforts that are excessive and completely unnecessary. If you keep fluctuating, just steadily changing something via rotations between the act of moving the keys, this has nothing to do with passing on energy. This is just how we learn to be free, how we can stand well on the fingers. So then when you play for real, you'll see almost no rotation at all. Sorry, I messed that up a bit that time. So the rotation, actually the most important rotation of all in the end is passive. It's not active. Now when I start off, I can do an active rotation. I stress it's not to bear on the fingers. If every finger becomes a centre, it doesn't receive active pressure from this rotation, or at least it's a tiny, tiny thing. It's not considerable. So as I go through them like this, I'm using the rotation. It's actively done, but not to push keys down. It's actively done around those fingers. The more I get to know it, the more, as long as the arm drifts a little behind each finger, the more there's a little bit of rotational response. And this is the style of rotation that's in everything we do. If we understand rotation as being there to help move the keys, it doesn't make any sense. The moment we do something fast like this, it's just ridiculous to think that with so little rotation and so clear that the fingers are the main move of the keys, it would be ridiculous to think that the reason for rotation is to give this tiny percentage of extra energy to the fingers. It doesn't make any rational sense. It's for freedom. That's why we always need rotation to some degree, and why it's often just passive. It's just a response. If the arm is free, based on the principle of action and reaction, as the finger takes the key, a response will come back at the arm. This is how we receive it. If we're rotating passively, then the arm is receiving what comes back instead of fighting against it. So fight against it like this, stopping the rotation, that's not good. If you think the rotation drives the keys, very often, I used to literally do this. I would shove through my fingers with the arm. Everyone says, yeah, arm energy is better, not finger energy, but it's a completely false analysis. It doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. The thing we need rotation for is not to deliver energy. We can use that to some degree in the right situations, but the primary function of rotation is that we can align behind those fingers, we can respond to them as they take the keys, and that's how we stay free in the forearm, allowing the fingers to do their job properly. So we have two distinct roles. Fingers are moving keys, rotation is helping organise and keep us free, so the fingers can move the keys. It's not there to do part of the finger's job for it. In some situations, yeah, we can help, but see, even when I do this, I'm getting a bit squashed there, I'm using too much rotation, even this kind of thing. It actually works better when it's more the finger taking the key. even for tremolos, this kind of thing. If you try to deliver the force of the rotation, you get burdened so easily, even for these tremolos. It's more stand up on these ones, now stand up on these ones. If I have a pair of notes here, when I have two in the middle, rotation doesn't pass energy to those very effectively at all. So very often we get stuck if we have a 4-note tremolo, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top like this. Rotation's really not effective at all for driving the keys. However, stand on 2 fingers, now rotate around your next 2 fingers, stand on those, go back and forth, changing the centre between those 2 pairs, and the rotation keeps you free. So honestly, there's so many things in piano playing that will start to make sense if we perform this rational analysis of the 2 different types of rotation. If we can feel the difference between them, we're going to have so much more success. We're going to know what to look for. We're not going to have this idea, oh yeah, I'm rotating, why am I getting squashed? It happens so easily. If we simplify and say, yeah, rotation frees you and rotation drives the keys, we've got 2 conflicting statements unless we separate those 2 forms of rotation. The rotation that drives the keys doesn't free you. The rotation that turns around as you move the key and after does free you. Only if we combine both of those can we get the benefits of each combined. Anyway, so I hope that clarifies a lot about the stuff that's generally unsaid on rotation. The reason I wanted to make this video, I was watching a video recently. There was a guy talking about another pianist made a video showing exercises from Liszt. And on this guy's video, he did it like kind of gotcha video, basically. He says, yeah, look at this guy. He says he's using finger independence, but he's actually using loads of rotation. And then he goes on, quite unpleasant to be honest, he says this guy doesn't understand what he's doing. Now, unfortunately, in this guy's video, okay, it's a little bit better. So if you did lock the arm and try to move only the thumb while the arm is rigid, yeah, you would have problems. Yeah, the rotation is important. However, after saying this guy doesn't understand what he's doing, this guy makes his own error. He gives us the simplistic rotation explanation. He says the reason you have to rotate is because it adds energy on top of the fingers. The fingers aren't up to the job of doing that. It's completely factually untrue. If you want to do this Liszt exercise well, you need to understand rotation around the finger that takes the key as a source of freedom. Because using it to drive the keys, again, 2 conflicting things, they do not actually work together. So if I drive into my thumb, again, either it can be squashed, or it's very stiff, you judder, you're stuck. It's horrible, that's not balance. If you just turn around the thumb, we don't drive into it at all in the first place. So actually, you don't need to put any energy through the rotation as the starting point. That's optional. If you just start on the key and then just do the freeing part around the thumb as centre, thumb takes the key, rotate around it, you have your source of freedom. So if I do that exercise, that's what's really important here. And on the video this guy was analysing, this is what's actually going on. He uses rotation to take the thumb out of the key. It helps to let go of the key. If we did that only with the thumb, that feels a bit stuck. So rotation can also take you out of the key. And then as the thumb comes to the key, it's like you're trying to stand on the thumb, turning around it, except the other fingers stay behind this time. So that's what's going on this video he was analysing. It's not that we need the rotation because it drives the key down. 2 completely conflicting things. If you want to understand the primary function of rotation, throw out this idea that it moves the key for you. Even on finger 4, actually especially on finger 4 in many ways, if you start trying to drive into that, if you don't get much finger movement, you're trying to use your arm to go into that, it actually becomes less safe, I'd suggest, than understanding real independence doesn't mean the arm is rigid. I mean, if you think about what independence means, like, is the only time we say someone's independent if they live as a hermit in the woods and never speak to anybody? No. There's degrees of independence. And in this kind of exercise, I think the right perspective to take is very much fingers move the keys and rotation turns us around those. It's not 100% independent. There's a relationship between what the finger's doing, moving the key, and what the arm is doing, responding around that finger as it moves the key. If we try and mix these things and say that the arm is sending energy through that finger, it actually complicates it here. It's a lot harder to perform that role of getting the freedom, certainly in this situation with the notes held down. Particularly when we get to things like finger 4, if you're trying to drive the arm into that, I'd personally say you're possibly more likely to injure yourself in some ways by trying to drive arm energy through that finger. I'll show you actually if you only use finger 4 like this. Slightly different situation though, but a really good exercise that shows how capable the fingers really are. No, they don't need arm energy driving into them. Just start in the key, start with the arm already down, literally just lift straight up. Don't drive forwards, don't shove arm energy through the finger, just come straight away. The finger's perfectly capable. You can get a lot of fast repetitions from finger 4 with the arm doing nothing but allowing freedom to happen by getting out of there slowly. So yeah, I hope this shows what rotation is really for and how, well, I mean it's both things. I stress it's not just one or the other. But I hope it's at least shown you the ingredient that's almost never explained. And I hope that will give you some idea how to integrate this into your practicing. So you're not using rotation to bear you into the piano, or at least if you are, you know how to follow it up. And you know that it's a completely different type of rotation that then gives you freedom afterwards.